Hey everyone, I'm Josh Hawkins. This is episode 26 of Opening Up the Gospels. In the last two episodes, we looked at Simeon in the temple with Mary, Joseph, and Jesus. As we saw earlier in Luke 2, they brought Jesus into the temple to present him before the Lord and to offer a sacrifice for their purification. Jesus is still only a little over a month old when Simeon holds him and declares that he would be like a sword that would cut through the midst of Israel, dividing and exposing what was really in their hearts towards God. This is one of the biggest themes of the Gospels that we're going to come back to over and over and over again. But again, just think about how shocking this must have been to Mary and Joseph. I wonder if they actually came to a point where they were wondering what the next crazy thing related to Jesus was going to be. Just think about all that's happened. Elizabeth's miraculous pregnancy is the sign to Mary's pregnancy, and the angel Gabriel's visit to Zechariah, and then again to Mary, the scandal in Nazareth, Joseph's dream, the shepherds and their story, and now Simeon. That's crazy, everything that's happened. Remember, all of this is the way that God chose to do things. We've got to take the time and ponder how much this tells us about what God is really like. In this episode, we're going to continue in the temple in Luke 2, starting at verse 36. And there was a prophetess, Anna, the daughter of Phanuel, of the tribe of Asher. She was advanced in years, having lived with her husband 7 years from when she was a virgin, and then as a widow until she was 84. She did not depart from the temple, worshiping with fasting and prayer night and day. And coming up at that very hour, she began to give thanks to God and to speak of him to all who were waiting for the redemption of Jerusalem. So here we are. It's the same day that Simeon met Jesus, and Luke goes on to tell us that another person, a widow named Anna, was there as well. Anna's in the temple when she looks and sees Mary and Joseph carrying Jesus, and it seems like she sees Simeon hold him and hears the proclamation made about him, because of what Luke says in verse 38. He says, coming up at that very hour. Other translations say coming in that moment or coming in that instant, meaning she came right after Simeon had finished speaking of Jesus. Anna is described as a prophetess. Later on in the book of Acts, Luke mentions the daughters of Philip, who were also prophetesses. And in 1 Corinthians 11, the Apostle Paul also talked about women who prophesied. In the Old Testament, we see Miriam, Deborah, Huldah, Noadiah, and Isaiah's wife. They're all portrayed as prophetesses. When we read that Anna was a prophetess, we shouldn't think she was some fortune teller or some predictor of the future. Luke isn't trying to make a huge point about the gift of prophecy or the nature of prophecy here. He's just underscoring the point that Anna had insight from God into who that baby Simeon was holding really was. That's why she goes on to proclaim him to all of her friends and fellow Jews who were expectant for God to fulfill all of his promises and restore Jerusalem, as the Old Testament records. If God didn't give her divine insight, she probably would have dismissed the whole scene with Simeon as just some really excited old guy in the temple. Luke gives us a little bit more information about Anna. Her name, Anna, means grace, and it's the same name as the Old Testament's Hannah. She was the daughter of Phanuel, which is just the Greek transliteration of the familiar Hebrew name Peniel. Remember the story of Jacob in Genesis 32? He wrestled with the angel of the Lord all night. His name was changed to Israel, and he called the place Peniel because he said, I have seen God face to face, yet my life is preserved. Luke also tells us that Anna was from the tribe of Asher. Asher is Jacob's 8th son, and his name just means happy because his birth made his mother Leah happy. Asher was one of the northern tribes of Israel and is relatively small and insignificant. Now you may wonder, what's the point? Luke honestly could have left these details out, and it probably wouldn't matter much to us because we have no idea who Phanuel is, and we may not even have heard of the tribe of Asher. Though Luke doesn't explicitly state the importance of why he mentions Anna's father or Anna's tribe, he does mention them. And we really can't be sure, but maybe it has something to do with the meaning of each of the words, like grace, face of God, and happy. Or maybe this Anna became well known among those in Jerusalem and then in the early church for the way that she spoke of Jesus. And Luke is differentiating her from other Annas so that people would go and say, oh, that Anna. Who knows? Some commentators have speculated some other things. I don't really have an answer, but speculating things gets my imagination going and actually makes Anna not just a character in a story, but a real person who was so confident that Jesus would be the one to restore Jerusalem as God had promised. Anna was very old. Luke says she was advanced in years. She had married and lived with her husband for 7 years. The next verse, verse 37, says that she was a widow until she was 84. This is a little bit troublesome here because other translations make it sound like she had been a widow for 84 years, not that she was 84 years old at the point that she saw Jesus. The phrase literally reads, "and she a widow up to 84 years." So there are two possibilities the commentators point out here. The first is what I've already mentioned, and that's what the ESV seems to take, that she was 84 years old when she met the baby Jesus. The second possibility, just say that she was maybe 14 years old when she was married, which is totally possible because Jewish women often, but not always, married when they were very young. She would then be 14 plus 7 years of marriage plus 84 years of widowhood, making her 105 years old. My goodness. Nonetheless, whatever it might be, Anna was very old. The bigger point in than precisely deducing her age was that she was a widow for the rest of her life and didn't remarry after her husband had died. Luke goes on to say that Anna did not depart from the temple, worshiping with fasting and prayer night and day. The temple was the center of Israel's religious life and a constant reminder of who God had called them to be. For Anna to be worshiping often there meant that Israel's hopes were always on her mind. This fits perfectly with what we've seen and looked at in the last episode with Simeon, who was waiting for the consolation of Israel. Now, Luke isn't saying here that Anna would have been in the temple 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, as if she actually lived there or something. Women were not normally allowed to stay in the temple during the night, plus the temple was actually closed at night and there was no public worship going on. So Luke is just using hyperbole here, saying that she was probably a very regular attender of all of the specific public and private temple services. Think about the person in your church who not only comes on Sunday morning, but is basically at church for all the other things going on during the week. And because of that, you could almost say, well, he lives there. But of course, that's not to be taken literally. The point that Luke is emphasizing here is Anna's single-minded devotion to God, especially after describing her age and her widowhood. Luke has already given us examples like Zechariah, Elizabeth, and Simeon, these ones who were devout and righteous in Israel, and now Anna just joins the ranks. Anna is also portrayed as worshiping God in the temple with fasting and prayer. We can't think church service or solemn assembly here. The temple in Jerusalem was nothing like our modern Western services today. Anna was a participant in the daily evening and morning prayers, which is probably what Luke is referencing when he says that Anna was there night and day. The Jewish day actually begins at sundown, which is totally different from us in modern times where it practically begins at sunrise. Anna was also there for special services for the Sabbath and feasts like the Passover, tabernacles, dedication, and others. And she was probably there for many private services as well, which might explain why she was there for Mary and Joseph's purification and the presentation of Jesus. Now, contrary to some modern ways this passage has been talked about, Anna wasn't in the temple interceding and changing the spiritual atmosphere of Jerusalem with her fasting and prayer, nor was she trying to earn more favor or get more spiritual authority from God. Through her fasting, she was mourning and expressing humility. These are the two purposes that the Bible outlines for fasting. She was specifically longing for the restoration of Jerusalem and for God to bring forth the Messiah and his kingdom. This is strikingly similar to Daniel in passages like Daniel chapter 10. Daniel was also righteous and devout like Anna was. Remember, Daniel was faithful to continue to pray for God to restore Jerusalem 3 times a day, even when he was in captivity and there seemed like there was no hope for his people. Daniel humbly postured himself before God with fasting as he prayed for the restoration of Israel, and that's exactly how Luke is characterizing Anna here. So this righteous woman, Anna, was in the right place at the right time in the temple. Maybe she was in the area of the temple called the Court of Women, where she sees Mary and Joseph coming with Jesus. She probably watched Simeon take up Jesus in his arms, hearing the words he speaks about him, and then perhaps comes down to the 4 of them. She too is now convinced that this child is indeed the Messiah. He's the consolation of Israel, and he would be the one who would restore the nation of Israel. And what does she do? She gives thanks to God and speaks of Jesus to everyone who is waiting for the redemption of Jerusalem. As I talked about in episode 24, this idea of redemption and consolation refers back to so many passages in the book of Isaiah. Both Simeon and Anna, they share the same hope, and Luke presents these 2 witnesses early on in his gospel as a picture of the righteous remnant of Israel longing for the restoration. Well, I'd encourage you to spend some time pondering Anna and her story this week. Think about what it must have been like for her. She had spent her whole life believing for Israel's restoration. This scene is just so precious. 2 old but very pious Jewish people, a newly married couple, and a 40-day-old baby, all part of the story of God in the flesh. Talk to Jesus about this. In the next episode, we're going to jump to Matthew's Gospel and begin to look at the visit from the Magi. If you've missed any of these episodes and you want to catch up, you can find them all on my website, www.joshuahawkins.com/gospels. God bless, and I hope to see you next time.